And presently he's a professor at Pace University. So we're going to welcome Dr. Whcr to our airways.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome,
Doctor.
And we also have that's calling in online.
Absolutely.
Former inspector of the New York City Police Department, Inspector Dwayne Montgomery. And Inspector Montgomery will be calling in. And he was the commander of the 28th Precinct, also a very accomplished, officer, person. He has a security company now that he is by the name of Overwatch, and he is the founder and chief executive officer of that, and very important person in the community. But Henry, before we get into this, there's so many things that have crossed our eyes in the news this week. I just want to touch on a few of them because there's so many things we can talk about. When I was leaving the house, they had this opening. We know these gala openings of these Hollywood movies, like the red carpet treatment and what have you, and this one ironically is called The Interview, and The Interview, they're a little afraid to have an opening because this deals with the North Korean top guy, and they're afraid to rub him any worse than they have already, because they suspect North Korea has broken into Sony's database, and these emails that have come out with their executives, and saying a lot of disparaging things from everyone from Angela Jolie to President Obama. God knows whatever else they have. Because it looks like they've just been sitting on this and waiting for an opportunity. So it's just it's kind of scary. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to mention, we had left the show last week with this whole Bill Cosby situation.
Yes.
And this man is an iconic figure to all of us sitting here. And I was speaking to my wife, and there's a difference between as the model who's the last one that came?
The supermodel, what was her name again?
Beverly Johnson.
Beverly Johnson,
yeah.
absolutely.
As Beverly Johnson said,
yes,
she was resistant of coming because she knows how the media tends to lynch black men, and put them all in a category. But there's also a sickness out there. There's a sickness when you're talking about forcible rape, and you're talking about people in power that have access and to do things and can get away with things, and they have. This is such an interesting time, we're living in. I feel so bad about this whole situation, but it's real, and I think that all of these things we as a community should talk about, because a lot of times we tend to shy away from this. And I've heard when I was in the hospital in the rehab the other day, a lot of the nurses were saying, "Oh, why don't they leave him alone?" This, that, and the other. But now that Beverly Johnson came forward, this is a black woman that has credibility in our community, and I believed what the other people were saying, to be honest with you, because they weren't seeking money, they weren't seeking financial gain. So this is and to his benefit, I was talking to my friend Marvin, who has been on the show before, and all the shows, the reruns of the Cosby Show, they've taken that off of TV land or whatever. I don't think that should happen either, because these were, those shows. The role he played, was a role of a father and a someone that we strive to be like. So to just cut that off, I think they need to rethink that. But moving forward, obviously he's losing everything moving forward.
And the fact that he can't be charged with the crime.
Statute of limitations have run out.
And he's just being silent. Why is he being silent? We don't know.
Well, the Cosby Show is still run on Centric.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
watch
and his
it.
other shows still run too.
Well, that Centric is black, a black-owned station.
Yeah.
So they show it. For me, the Beverly Johnson was like the coup d'état.
Yeah.
What about Wendy Williams? She came out and said something too.
Well, I don't know.
Also.
I just heard
Yeah,
Beverly
no.
Johnson, so I just it doesn't look good. But yeah. So I mean that's a topic that we would have to devote a lot of time. But we do have our Dr. Porcher here in the studio.
Yes.
And Dr. Porcher, there's a whole lot of I'm thinking about what the commissioner says about retraining, and periodically there's that call for retraining, and I don't know. I think my question is, what kind of training is taking place presently, where a retraining? What kind of retraining are they going to do that they had not instructed police officers to do, given the well, let me say this. I have a number of questions, but when I was thinking about Patrick Lynch saying it wasn't a chokehold, it was a seatbelt hold.
It was a takedown hold.
A takedown hole, right? I heard takedown.
He said a seatbelt hold
Yeah,
when I saw.
he did say seatbelt at one
seatbelt
point
holes,
to
so.
minimize it, like in people's mind.
You have to take in consideration what role Patrick Lynch plays in this particular instance. Patrick Lynch is the PBA president, so as a union president, of course, he's unequivocally going to take the side of police, which I don't necessarily agree with, but at the end of the day, I also understand it, because you have the police officers that pay union dues for representation. So he basically puts forth that platform that the officer acted appropriately. I don't agree with the incident. However, I also understand what Patrick Lynch's stand on this particular circumstance was. And going back to your question in connection with the professional development, quote unquote, the training in the police department. Generally, when police officers enter the police department, when they go through the recruit stage, they take three different components. I said four different disciplines. There's physical training, there's behavioral science, behavioral/social science, there's a law, and a police science block. Now, the combination, the amalgamation of those four different disciplines, what an officer trains through, and 6 months later, they subsequently end up on the street as sworn police officers. Now, training or professional development should be a constantly ever so evolving course that officers should pursue. Now, the police department traditionally, they'll have training seminars that that officers are responsible for attending. I think it's twice a year, something to that effect. But I don't believe it's a one-fit solution in connection with the training. I mean, we look at our interaction with officers in the street, and when we look at it, more so particularly the communities of color, we tend to have a different we tend to have a different outlook on police in our community. Oftentimes we feel as communities of color that the police are not treating us in an appropriate manner. So when we look at what the professional development that they're using right now is, it's safe to say within the communities of color, we're not happy with whatever they're doing. So they need to ramp up and acquire a different solution, a better solution that would fulfill our needs and obligations in the communities of color. Now, we go back to the broken windows theory, and we look at Police Commissioner Bratton. He was the architect of this broken windows theory, that dates back to the early 90s. When we go back to the Giuliani administration, Commissioner Bratton came in and he implemented a system that was referred to as CompStat, and it focused on aggressive policing towards low-level offenses, and the rationale was if we stop the individuals that commit the lower offenses, the lower level offenses, they won't in turn create. They won't participate in the larger, more greater offenses. That can be subjective. It can be questioned on different fronts. But we look at what Commissioner Bratton did at that time compared to now coming back with Mayor de Blasio. We see a very different mindset, and it seems as if now Police Commissioner Bratton is more so focused on, I guess, police community relations, but I see this as more of a reaction to what occurred in the Eric Gardner case.
Mm-hmm.
We look at what happened with Eric Gardner. We look at Akai Gurley. These instances are happening in these communities of color, and they're impacting on, and they're affecting us in a negative way. So what's going to happen at this stage is we need to have more. We need to have a greater infusion of police and community. Now, we think about this professional development. What are they going to do? I think, for starters, we need to have members of the community that are involved in this professional development. What do the communities want? Because we live in a democratic society. So, as a democratic society, we elect the officials that are responsible for assisting us in our day-to-day, within our government. And we refer to something that's referred to as the social contract. The social contract was something that was created years ago amongst John Locke and Rousseau, philosophers that agreed that, look, we as civilians are willing to give up certain rights to government in exchange for afforded protections. Mm-hmm. Now, when we look at the social contract, how that's infused into the Constitution, we as members of community of color don't feel that we're getting our fair shake. So if we're not getting our fair shake, some sense of shakeup needs to occur within this democracy, because we pay taxes for these police officers that police our communities. So going back to this professional development, I really think that it's strongly needed. We strongly need an infusion of police and community, and not just the mainstream community activists such as Al Sharpton, etc. Not saying that those individuals are doing a bad job. However, let's look much further. Let's look to the people let's look to the community activists that are actually in your community that you deal with on a day-to-day. The person that puts together, let's say, a free lunch program. Those people that are in your communities, those community activists that are in your communities that you don't see on television, those are the people that we really need to have police and community infused with. They need to sit down with the police and devise these strategies for what this professional development is that we need in our communities. Because at the end of the day, it's unfortunate, but it seems like
who takes the lead on that, Dr. Portia? How does that begin?
I think it's going to start with the police department. It has to start with the police department, and the police department is going to have to take the first step forward and engage those community leaders. I mean, we have a community affairs bureau, which is in the police department. That's fine and well, but apparently we need some serious adjusting and retooling, because that strategy is not assisting the communities of colors the way it should.
Okay, we have Inspector Montgomery online. Would you like to chime in?
Let us give the call-in number. Our call-in number here is 212-650-6903. We welcome your calls. Inspector Montgomery, how are you?
Good.
Okay.
Dan Portia, how you feeling?
How you doing there, Dwayne?
I'm good.
Getting younger every day.
First of all, how do you guys know each other? I'd like to know that first.
I knew Dwayne. I knew Inspector Montgomery for years, as he was in the police, from when he was a lieutenant working in the MISD unit, and then I guess generally those of us that are of color, we tend to connect with other members of the department that are of color. So that's where that comes
move up in
play.
the ranks like you have.
Exactly.
Like both of you have, right?
Well, even outside of moving up in the rank, you tend to cling to those people that assimilate, that look just like yourself.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. But your comment, Inspector Montgomery, are you with us? You got disconnected a little bit. Yeah. Okay, we got him back. Yes.
Okay. Chime in, Dwayne.
Yeah, Darren and I, we go back years. You always try to surround yourself with positive people while you're on the job. And, so I guess positive like minds attract. So we definitely. But in regards to what Darren's saying, yes, he's absolutely right. When you look at the way CompStat was first devised, the premise behind CompStat is a good premise, because what it does is forces the command of what's happening within this precinct. And then, as you guys are saying, that once you're aware of what's happening, then what happens from that point? you have to devise a plan. You have to know what's happening, where it's happening. Now you have to devise a plan to more or less address it. And then with community policing or CPOP, what CPOP did, CPOP had a formula for how you go about formulating a plan. First, it tells you identify a problem. Once you identify the problem, then you come up with a solution to address that problem. Then you implement that solution, and while that solution is being implemented, you have to go back and monitor it to see if you're achieving the results in which you want. And if not, then you have to tweak it. Then once you tweak it, you implement it again. And so just like what he's saying right now, times have changed from when we first had concept back in, I think, the 90s of Commissioner Bratton's first time to where it is now. Now, the crime rate is at an all-time low. How do you bring it lower? How do you bring it lower without infringing upon people's rights? And we have to become more of a community-minded police department. It's no longer where you can just lock somebody up and you know what, and everybody's happy that the person's off the street. No, when you lock somebody up, how did you affect that arrest? Were you disrespectful? Were you abusive? Did you violate his rights? Right. All of that plays into the way the community perceives you and how they're going to cooperate with you going forward.
Or not cooperate. Right.
Question.
Right, or not.
Right.
Should there be a residency law for police officers?
I think that the residency law is a good take. When you go out to Nassau and Suffolk counties, they have residency requirements, whereas police, in order to be a cop in Nassau and Suffolk County, you need to live there. I think that's a rule that we should take on, that we should utilize here in the city. However, time and time again, it's been struck down by the city council. But once again, we think in terms of the culture that we have in the city of New York. No one knows that any better than the actual citizens that live in the city of New York. So when you take, let's say, an officer that lives in Rockland County, and you place him in Brownsville or East New York, and, and then we can have a culture shock that comes into play. So when we look at what happened with Akai Gurley, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we had an Asian officer that was conducting, it's referred to as a vertical patrol. It's a building check. They basically take the elevator to the top floor and they walk down the stairs. Now, the officer alleges that this was an accident, whereas he had his firearm in his left hand and a flashlight in his right hand, and he was opening the door, and once he opened the door, this accident occurred, and that's when a shot was fired. I think that if I was to, and I don't know where this officer he very well possibly lived in the city, that I'm not sure of, but you decrease, I think you're, when you statistically decrease the level of uneasiness, so to speak, when we have individuals that are from the city that work in the city.
I think we have a caller. Do we have a caller, Reg?
Go ahead, caller.
Yeah.
Caller, you're on the air. Go ahead. Make your comment.
Yeah, it's Jay Smiley. I just wanted to kind of like make a presentation of three-step program. The first thing that we're probably unaware of is that policemen are just like we are, aren't they? Aren't they, citizens and family people and, those things. But my point being that in their psychological training, they're taught to role play. And within that role play suggestion is good cop, bad cop. So when do they snap out of it? When do they stop role playing? And when he goes home, is he still a police officer? Just to be clear on what I'm saying, I have family members that are in the police department. And when we interact, I definitely suggest to them, leave your badge on the outside and do it. You're not talking to your general population. You're talking to your family. So suggestively, I would then say, if the public is going to get involved, then we should separate the good cops from the bad cops. We should have a program that demonstrates that if you are in our community and you're performing admirably, we want to suggest that we even possibly maybe a stretch would be we adopt you as an honorary member of our community, like we do at WHCR. You become a family member not just based on what your name is or what your presentation is, but if you see our view or if we warm up to the mentalities that you suggest, we adopt you as a family member, and it's plain and simple.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for the call. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who wants to respond?
Actually, I wanted to respond to
Okay.
that. I'm sorry. I think, sir, what is your name again?
He's gone.
Oh, okay.
You can just
All right,
respond to him.
Based on what he stated, I will be the first to tell you that there's a systemic problem within the NYPD. It's a cultural problem, and we need, I should say we, but the department needs a shift in that particular culture. Because when I go to, when I do business in certain places, even McDonald's, hello, how are you? Can I help you? Is this is that all? I mean, people, the customer service is it's leaps and bounds from what I experience within the NYPD. I mean, I've been stopped on numerous occasions, and I found that officers, in many instances, really require an attitude adjustment, and they need to take in consideration that they police our community, and they're getting paid for policing our community. So you should be thankful that you can police in our community, because if you weren't policing in our community, you wouldn't have a job. So I think it's a systemic culture that needs to be adjusted in the police department, and it should be somewhat reflective of individuals that work within private industry. If you don't, if you're not customer friendly, if you're not customer service minded, you're fired. I'm not saying that we should take it to the point where we should fire an officer just because he's discourteous. Granted, discipline should follow, but there should be an evolution in that culture to drive officers towards treating people a certain way, customer service friendly. And in addition to that, many officers may make this argument that, hey, look, you know what? I work in a very violent neighborhood. I work in East New York. I work in Brownsville, South Bronx, whatever. I think that a great idea would be to rotate a lot of these officers. You're in Forest Hills for a month. Next month, you're working in Midtown. The month after that, you're working in the South Bronx. I think that's one component that we should look at.
One solution. Let me ask both of you a question. I was watching the Reed Report, Joy Reid on MSNBC prior to coming here, and they had the mother of two young men that were both killed for no real reason. One was what the movie Fruitvale Station came, and the other mother was a mother. Her son was 18 years old, 3 months from graduation, and this police officer had the body camera on, and he took it off right before killing the young man. Now, it seems like the mood of the country is that there are going to be these body cameras, because it seems like it's going through legislation, and from the president on down seems to. What do you think the remedy, the discipline, if someone was to turn it off, okay, in the midst of a confrontational crime, what should happen to that police officer?
It's really difficult to make that assessment at this early stage, because there are going to be certain instances where that body camera should be turned off, such as if an officer is encountering the victim of a sexual assault.
A rape, exactly.
Right, or if the officer is encountering someone that's a possible informant, or if the officer's encountering someone such as, let's say, a domestic violence victim. There are going to be certain instances of confidentiality that an officer needs to oblige, coupled with, of course, the simple things like going to the bathroom and things to that effect. So I think that in itself is something that's going to need, we're going to have to really tool the strategy in terms of when the camera goes on, when it goes off. Are we going to have instances where an officer has his camera off, like you just mentioned, and a fatality occurs? Absolutely. I think a disciplinary process needs to be in place to hold an officer accountable for if he or she turns their body camera off. They need to have a plausible reason why this should occur.
Just let me chime in on something that Darren just said earlier about shifting officers from precinct to precinct. One of the problems with that is that they thought about doing that back on the Bennett Ward. They had that whole idea, that whole concept set up. And the reason why it didn't go forward was because the community started complaining about, we have our good officers. Why should we have to lose our good officers because, another precinct is experiencing a problem? So they had to try to strike a balance between, well, how do you keep the good officers that's familiar with their area, that the community likes within that area, and not receive the bad officers, or I don't even want to say bad officers, but not to receive the officers who are not performing up to par. So that was only just one issue, one concern regarding shifting officers from place to place.
Yes.
And as Darren said, with the body cameras, he's absolutely right. You have a lot of situations that involve confidentiality. And the only way that's going to work is that they have to come up with some procedures. As you said, you have to, whether it's strict disciplinary procedures for people who turn it off in the midst of a situation, or whatever rules they come up with, but there has to be some type of rule that will not be in the officer's best interest to turn that camera off in violation of department rules and procedures.
Inspector Montgomery, I have a question. When I was reading an article, it was and it talked about how when members of Noble, Black National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, you guys came back from President Obama's first inauguration, and you guys had a mission on coming back into the community to be more gentle and more peaceful, I believe. Something to that effect?
Well, Noble's mission has always been justice by action. I don't know, since I've known Noble, we've always been trying to take a positive role to more or less mediate problems within the community and come up with a better working relationship. And when we came back from the Barack Obama inauguration the first time, everyone was so proud, because we had an African American in office. Mm-hmm. It radiated all the way down to us. And we came out there, and our whole goal was to let the community know, you know what, we are here to show you what policing can be.
Yeah, I know you were, when you were the commander of the 28th Precinct, you were referred to as someone who had open door policy and you always was smiling. How supportive was the Commissioner Kelly and the people in, I guess, the second deputy, the people in the decision-making process, how supportive were they of the Noble's mission?
Well, I don't know how supportive they were of Noble's mission, but as far as being supportive of me as an individual, Commissioner Kelly, he's always supported me. I know there's a lot of people who do not feel that Commissioner Kelly did the right thing by our community, but whatever I needed for the 2A precinct in Harlem, I got without a problem. Without a problem. Him and Raymond Diaz, who was the borough commander, they were excellent.
Yeah, too bad. I think one of the things might help if they had more precinct commanders of color.
Even if you get the precinct commanders of color, they have to be community-minded people.
Exactly.
If you get a precinct commander that's not, he could be black, white, green, or orange. If he's not for the community, it's not going to work. When I came up to Harlem, my concept was, not to take away from any other precinct or any other neighborhood, but I said that, people were saying, well, why don't they receive the same level of policing that other communities receive? And my response to them was that, no, you shouldn't even be satisfied with that. You should want a higher level of community policing than other communities. In other words, you always strive higher. And I think Darren can attest to this. When we came on the job, that radio that people walk around with nowadays, we didn't really have radios. Sometimes you turned out on your tour and you didn't have a radio. So now, who are you going to rely upon to get your back? The community. So that forced you to interact with the community.
Tell me.
Let me just make a.
Sure.
You're listening to WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. This is another perspective. We're speaking with Dr. Darren Porcher and Inspector Dwayne Montgomery. The call-in number 212-650-6903. 212-650-6903.
In the last week or so, we've seen a lot of the professional basketball players. Starting with, I think, Darren Rose, Kobe Bryant, LeBron, come out with these shirts and the teams, I Can't Breathe. And, this obviously is a little different position than we have seen years before with superstar athletes like Michael Jordan and Woods. And there are protests around the entire country. So what is it like when black police officers are on duty, with this, whether it be a